My name's Emma Carter. I'm 29 years old, and the apartment I spent half a decade saving up for has suddenly become ground zero for a whole new round of family chaos. So, picture this. We're at our usual monthly family dinner and out of nowhere my parents just dropped this bomb. Your sister will be moving into your apartment. They said it like my place was some kind of communal resource, not the result of years of my own hard work. I managed to keep a straight face and took another sip of my wine, but inside I was absolutely losing it. The way my mom looked at me made it clear this wasn't up for debate, and the smug grin on my sister's face told me everything I needed to know about how she felt. Before I get into the details of how this little family ambush went down and what I did about it, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Growing up as the middle kid in the Carter household meant always living under this cloud of high expectations and perfectionism, but somehow those rules seemed to shift depending on which one of us you were talking about. Being the first in my family to finish college was a big deal to me, but to my parents, it barely registered. They acted like it was just the bare minimum even though I juggled 3 jobs and kept a full scholarship the whole time. My downtown Denver apartment isn't just a place with 4 walls, exposed brick and sunlight that turns the hardwood floors gold in the morning. To me it's a symbol of every extra shift I picked up at the campus coffee shop, every tutoring gig I squeezed in between classes, and every dollar I saved by skipping out on weekend trips with friends. Signing that lease 2 years ago felt like I'd finally carved out something that was truly mine, a real, physical sign of my independence from a family dynamic that always left me feeling overlooked and desperate for a little recognition. My older sister Lauren has always been the family favorite, the golden child. Her art shows were paid for by my parents, while my academic wins barely got a "that's nice" at dinner. Lauren treated our parents' house like it was a hotel, coming and going after every breakup or failed job, and somehow it was never her fault. She'd show up with suitcases full of designer clothes bought on my parents' dime, crying about how tough life was, and they'd hand her keys to their vacation home or buy her a new car to help her start over. Meanwhile, I was still driving the same old Toyota Corolla I bought back in college, keeping it running because I knew if it died I was on my own. My little brother Mason, the youngest, always got a free pass. He was finding himself, which meant bouncing from one abandoned hobby to another, all funded by my parents without a second thought. The 3 of us might as well have been living on different planets, each with our own set of rules and expectations. I was always stuck in the middle, expected to be self-sufficient but also endlessly flexible whenever anyone needed something. Honestly, my parents making big decisions about my life without even asking me wasn't anything new. When I was 16, they signed me up to babysit my cousin's kids every weekend all summer, and I only found out after the fact. In college, they gave my apartment address to distant relatives who needed a place to crash for a wedding, and I got a call the morning they showed up. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I'd get accused of being selfish and reminded about family obligations, which for some reason never seemed to apply to my siblings. But this past year things started to change. I finally found my stride at work as an environmental consultant, earning respect that had nothing to do with my family's opinion. I started seeing a therapist who helped me realize that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was actually healthy. I even managed to say no to hosting Thanksgiving, breaking a tradition that always left me drained and unappreciated. Those little wins made me feel like I was finally taking control of my relationship with my family, showing up as an adult with my own choices instead of just trying to keep everyone happy. Still, I kept up with the monthly family dinners, a compromise to keep some connection without giving up too much of myself. I had no idea that this particular Sunday dinner would push every limit I'd worked so hard to set, forcing me to decide if I was really ready to stand up for myself, even if it meant standing alone against my family's expectations. When I walked in, the house was filled with the smell of my mom's famous pot roast. I made sure to show up exactly 10 minutes late, a tiny act of rebellion I allowed myself every month. My dad greeted me with his usual quick hug and a comment about Denver traffic, as if my timing was some kind of personal insult instead of a choice. Lauren was already there, lounging on the couch with a glass of wine, her fancy boots up on Mom's antique coffee table, something I'd never get away with. Mason strolled in 20 minutes after me and was met with nothing but warm smiles and a playful, "We were about to start without you" from Mom. Dinner started off like it always did. Dad took over the conversation with his takes on politics and business, while Mom chimed in with questions about our week that were really just setups for her to share the latest neighborhood gossip. I was halfway through my carefully edited update about work when Dad cleared his throat, The universal sign in our family that the real reason for the dinner was about to come out. Dad cleared his throat and announced, "Lauren has some news," like he was about to introduce the president or something. My sister glanced up from her phone, which she'd been scrolling under the table, and her face shifted from bored to that well-rehearsed look of vulnerability she always pulled out for family moments. "Tyler and I broke up," she said, naming her boyfriend of the last 8 months. I'd only met the guy once at a family barbecue where he spent most of his time rambling about crypto investments. He's being totally unreasonable about the apartment lease. He says I still have to pay even though I'm moving out. Mom reached across the table and squeezed Lauren's hand, her voice full of sympathy. "That's just not fair. She shouldn't have to deal with all this stress on top of a breakup." I nodded automatically, playing the part of the supportive sister, while in my head I was already counting down the minutes until I could politely excuse myself. Dad didn't miss a beat, slicing into his roast beef like a surgeon. "So, we've got it all figured out. Lauren's going to stay at your place while she gets back on her feet." He said it so casually, like he was just letting me know we were having chicken instead of beef for dinner, not that my personal space was about to be invaded. Mom's face lit up as she started talking through the details. "It really is the best solution. You've got that extra room you use as an office and you're always saying you work late at the office anyway. Lauren just needs a few months to get settled and recover." That old, familiar tightness crept into my chest, the physical sign that my boundaries were being steamrolled yet again. I tried to keep my voice steady as I replied, "Actually, I use my office. I've been picking up freelance work that needs a dedicated space." Lauren rolled her eyes, not even trying to hide how little she cared. "You can just work at the kitchen table. That's what I did all through college." Never mind that her college years were spent getting an art degree, fully funded by our parents, stretched out over 5.5 years with plenty of mental health breaks. Dad chimed in again, his tone final. "It's only temporary. Family looks out for each other." Mom was already scrolling through her phone, checking her calendar. "We can help move her stuff next Saturday. Your building has visitor parking, right?" I sat there watching them plan the dismantling of my sanctuary with the same excitement they once had for Lauren's sweet 16, while my own 18th birthday barely got a mention. Across the table my brother caught my eye, then quickly looked away, wanting no part of a fight that didn't involve him. I found myself at that all-too-familiar fork in the road. Speak up and risk the full force of family disappointment, or stay quiet and let my boundaries get trampled yet again. But this time something inside me shifted. Instead of that old anxious urge to keep the peace, I felt a strange sense of calm and certainty. "I'll have to check my lease about long-term guests," I said, keeping my tone neutral, neither agreeing nor flat-out refusing. Mom just waved off my concern. "Oh, that's just paperwork. They can't stop you from helping your sister." I nodded again, letting them think I was on board, while in my head I was already sketching out a completely different plan. The conversation rolled on, all about Lauren's move, with nobody bothering to ask if I had plans that weekend or if there was anything they might be missing. I kept my answers short, letting them mistake my silence for agreement, when really I was just biding my time. As I helped clear the dishes after dessert, I was already mapping out my next move in my head. I realized I'd finally hit the point where just going along to get along wasn't something I could do anymore. The drive home from my parents' place felt like a breath of fresh air, my car turning into this in-between space where the dutiful daughter faded away, and I started to feel like a woman ready to take charge of her own life. When I pulled up outside my apartment, I turned off the engine but just sat there for a while. That familiar post-family dinner emotional hangover was settling in, but this time it was mixed with something new, a blend of justified anger and total clarity. I replayed the whole dinner in my mind, hearing my parents assign my sister to my apartment without even pretending to care what I thought. The pattern was so obvious now, it was almost funny. My needs always came last, my space and time treated like they belonged to everyone, while my siblings' comfort was untouchable. I started thinking back on all those times I kept my mouth shut just to keep things calm, how every little time I gave in had added up, until everyone just assumed I'd always be the one to bend. Not this time, I told myself, catching my own eyes in the rearview mirror and feeling a surprising steadiness in my voice. Once I got inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and wandered from room to room, really taking it all in. For the first time in a while, I saw my place for what it was, a safe haven I'd built with my own two hands. That office they wanted me to give up wasn't just a desk and a chair. It was where I chased after dreams my family never really understood, a space filled with projects that actually mattered to me. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and felt determination settle in where resignation usually lived after a family dinner. The first thing I did was pull up my lease, just to double-check what I already knew. Subletting wasn't allowed without management's say-so, and any guest staying more than 2 weeks had to be officially added to the lease, complete with background and credit checks. Instead of seeing these rules as roadblocks, I realized they were actually the backbone of my response. Next, I called up my friend Chloe. She'd seen my boundaries get chipped away over the years, so she knew the drill. When I told her what happened, she practically shouted, "They did what? Oh, no way, Em, you can't let them steamroll you again." Hearing her outrage made me feel seen in a way I rarely did. Her outside perspective was the validation I didn't know I needed. "I'm not going to let it happen," I told her, and even I was surprised by how sure I sounded. "I just have to figure out how to handle this without blowing up the whole family." We started brainstorming, quickly tossing out the idea of a direct confrontation. My family was too good at wearing me down with guilt and persistence. This time, I needed a plan that was more about action than arguing. "What if you just weren't there?" Chloe suggested. "Like when they show up with Lauren's stuff, you're just gone." That idea hit me like a lightning bolt. I had vacation days saved up, and there was a work conference in Austin coming up that I could probably reschedule for sooner. Suddenly, I was thinking not just about dodging this one conflict, but about setting a new standard for how I let my family treat me. After we hung up, I dove into research on tenant rights, jotting down notes about what protections I had. I emailed my building manager asking about the visitor policy and security, but kept it casual so it wouldn't raise any red flags. By midnight, my nerves had given way to a kind of focused, methodical energy. I started a document laying out every step I'd need to take to protect my space and my boundaries. Shifting my schedule, planning my communication, covering the legal angles, and coming up with backup plans. I even thought about who could stay in my apartment while I was gone, someone who'd make it impossible for Lauren to just move in. My coworker Ryan had mentioned needing a place to crash while his condo was being fixed up. He was responsible, trustworthy, and, best of all, a total stranger to my family. He'd be the perfect person to sublet to, even for a short time. That's when it all clicked. I could set up a legitimate short-term sublease for Ryan, with everything documented and above board, something my family couldn't just bulldoze their way through. By the time I finally crawled into bed, I was exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired. For once, I wasn't lying awake, running through all the ways I'd have to justify standing up for myself. Instead, I was actually looking forward to seeing this plan through, knowing that, this time, my family would have to face the fact that I was an adult with rights they couldn't just ignore. I knew it wouldn't be easy and it might get messy, but as I drifted off to sleep, I was sure of one thing. Facing a little discomfort now was a whole lot better than slowly suffocating under the weight of always giving in. The week after that family dinner played out like clockwork as I put my plan into action step by step. Monday morning, I headed straight to my building's management office and found Linda, the property manager who'd signed off on my lease 2 years back. "I'm thinking about having a friend stay at my place while I'm out of town for work," I told her, keeping things as neutral as possible. "I just want to make sure I'm clear on all the rules for guests and temporary stays." Linda handed me the official visitor guidelines and the paperwork for a sublease, explaining that anyone staying more than 14 days needed management's approval and a background check. I nodded along, acting like I was just curious, but inside I was making a mental note. These rules were a far cry from what my family seemed to believe. "And just to be sure," I asked, "if someone tried to move in without going through all this?" Linda didn't hesitate. "That's absolutely not allowed. Security would stop them at the door if they're not authorized. We take that very seriously. It's about safety and following the law." With that reassurance, I texted Ryan during my lunch break, keeping things professional and leaving out the messy family details. "I need someone reliable to stay in my apartment for a couple of weeks while I'm away. There'd be a formal sublease to protect us both. Would you be interested?" Ryan got back to me within the hour, saying the timing was perfect since his condo repairs were still dragging on. We set up a time to meet after work on Wednesday to go over everything and get the paperwork sorted. Tuesday night, Lauren sent her first text. "Mom says I should check with you about what furniture I should bring. I think my bedroom set would look way better in your spare room than whatever you've got." The sheer nerve in her message just confirmed I was making the right call. I replied with something vague on purpose. "I'm still working out some details about the apartment. Let's talk next week." It was just enough to buy me time without giving anything away. Wednesday, I met up with Ryan after work, gave him a tour of the apartment and explained how the arrangement would work. We both signed the sublease agreement and I made sure management got a copy so everything was official. There's one more thing, I said, feeling a little awkward but determined to be clear. My family doesn't know about this setup and they might show up expecting me to be here. If that happens, you don't owe them any explanations, just let them know you're the legal tenant for now. Ryan, who'd had his own share of family drama after his divorce, just nodded. No problem. I'll keep it simple, just the facts. That night, I booked my work trip to line up perfectly with the day my family planned to move Lauren in. I reserved a hotel room in a quiet coastal town nearby, figuring I could get some peace and still be reachable if something urgent came up. Thursday morning, I emailed IT at work to request remote access for the week, explaining I'd need to work from a different location for personal reasons. With my job squared away, I started prepping my apartment. I packed up important papers and anything irreplaceable, moving them to a small storage unit I rented for the month. I took photos of every room, just in case I needed proof of the apartment's condition when I got back. By Friday, my mom had called twice, asking about parking and whether I could clear off some bookshelves for Lauren's essentials. I kept my replies short, blaming work deadlines and promising we'd sort it all out before the weekend. I wanted her to think I was just busy, not plotting a full-on counter move. Saturday, I installed a small security camera in the living room, aimed at the front door, a step I never thought I'd have to take with my own family. I handed Ryan a set of keys, gave him the building access code and wrote up an authorization note for security. That evening my dad texted, "We'll be there at 11 a.m. Saturday. Have the parking pass ready and clear space in your closet for Lauren's winter clothes." No questions, no checking if I was free, just orders. That tone, so matter-of-fact and entitled, only made me more certain I was doing the right thing. Sunday morning, I met up with Ryan for one last walkthrough, making sure he was clear on the boundaries of our arrangement and giving him emergency contacts, none of which included my family for obvious reasons. As I packed my suitcase for the work trip, I felt a steady calm settle over me, a feeling I wasn't used to in these situations. My phone buzzed with a final message from my mom. "Lauren's so excited for her fresh start at your place. This will bring you girls closer together." I didn't bother replying, recognizing it for what it was, another attempt to dress up their overreach as some kind of gift I should be grateful for. By Sunday night, everything was set. I'd taken back control not by picking a fight, but by planning carefully and using my rights the way any adult should. I put my phone on silent, except for work and Ryan, and braced myself for the storm I knew was coming when my family's expectations crashed into the reality I'd put in place. The boundaries I'd drawn up on paper were about to be tested in the real world, and for the first time, I actually felt ready to stand my ground instead of getting swept away by their demands. The days leading up to my family's attempted takeover brought a steady stream of messages that only confirmed I was doing the right thing. Monday morning, Lauren texted, "I'm donating your guest room furniture to make space for my bedroom set. Hope that's cool." No question, no real request, just her usual way of making decisions about my stuff like it was hers. I didn't answer right away, letting her assumption hang in the air while I focused on getting ready to leave. By lunchtime, my mom had already called twice, leaving voicemails about paint colors Lauren was considering for her room and asking if I could take down the depressing photos in my hallway to make room for Lauren's concert posters. The way they dismissed my carefully chosen decor, pieces that actually meant something to me, stung, but it also made me even more determined to stick to my plan. Tuesday night my dad called, his voice mixing that usual authority with a fake concern. "Your mother says you haven't been answering her texts about Lauren's move. Is there something we need to talk about?" It wasn't really a question, just a thinly veiled order to get in line. "I've just been slammed at work," I replied, the half-truth rolling off my tongue. "Trying to wrap up some projects before the weekend." He grunted, clearly taking my answer as a sign I was going along with everything, exactly what I wanted him to think. Wednesday, things ramped up when Lauren sent a group text to the family, announcing she'd given notice at her apartment and booked movers for Saturday. "So excited for sister bonding time," she wrote, tagging me with a bunch of heart emojis that felt more like a land grab than any real affection. Mom jumped in, planning a moving day lunch at my place, and Dad started talking logistics about borrowing a truck for Lauren's furniture. The whole conversation rolled on without me, as if my only role was to show up and say yes. That night I grabbed dinner with Chloe, my last chance to see her before everything went down. She scrolled through the screenshots of my family's messages, shaking her head. They really think you're just going to let them walk all over you, don't they? I nodded, picking at my food, the weight of what was coming settling in my gut. I know I'm doing the right thing, but I still feel guilty, like I'm being selfish for not just letting Lauren move in. Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not being mean. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Expecting respect is the bare minimum. They're the ones out of line, not you. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear, even if I was still working on believing them. Thursday brought the boldest move yet. My mom forwarded me an email confirmation for a furniture delivery to my apartment, scheduled for Monday after the move. Lauren found the perfect desk for her creative projects. Don't worry about the cost, it's our housewarming gift to her. The nerve of arranging deliveries to my home without even asking sent a jolt of anger through me that, for once, was stronger than my anxiety. I forwarded the delivery confirmation to Ryan with a quick note, letting him know to refuse any packages for Lauren, then blocked my mom's email from my work account so I could actually focus. By Friday, the day before their big move, my phone was blowing up. My dad called 3 times during my morning meetings, each voicemail sounding more annoyed than the last. "We need the visitor parking passcode," he said in the first. "Call your mother about the parking situation," he barked in the second. By the third, he'd lost all patience. "Emma, this is ridiculous. Call us back immediately about tomorrow's arrangements." Meanwhile, my mom was sending a mix of guilt trips about Lauren's fragile emotional state and passive-aggressive reminders about family duty. "Your sister would do this for you," she texted, conveniently forgetting the time I needed a place to stay after my apartment flooded and Lauren claimed her spare room was for art supplies. By early evening, I had my bag packed for the weekend and double-checked everything with Ryan, who was set to move in later that night. I set up an out-of-office reply on my email, blaming a sudden work emergency that required immediate travel, just vague enough to sound official and keep people from asking too many questions. As I was getting ready to leave, my phone buzzed with one last message from my dad. "We'll be at your building at 11 a.m. sharp. Lauren's whole apartment is packed and ready. Don't make this difficult." That old, commanding tone, so familiar but now so clearly out of line, just made me more certain I was doing the right thing. I took a final walk through my apartment, soaking in the peace and quiet before the chaos I knew was coming. For the first time since I could remember, I was putting my own boundaries ahead of my family's demands. Even though my stomach was in knots, I felt a new kind of self-respect growing inside me. As I locked the door and handed Ryan the keys in the hallway, I let myself face a hard truth. Sometimes setting healthy boundaries with family feels like betrayal, mostly because they've taught you to betray yourself instead. The real test would come the next day when my family showed up expecting me to fall in line, only to find out I'd built a wall they couldn't just walk through. Saturday morning arrived with that perfect northwest autumn weather, crisp, sunny, the kind of day that usually put a spring in my step. I woke up in my hotel room half an hour from my apartment, feeling a mix of nerves and a strange, steady calm about the line I was finally drawing. My phone, which I'd kept on Do Not Disturb all night, showed 5 missed calls from my mom starting at 7:30 a.m., 3 from my dad, and a string of increasingly frantic texts from Lauren. The first message, cheerful enough, came at 9:15. "On our way. Dad borrowed Uncle Mark's truck for my dresser, so excited." By 10:30 the tone had changed. "Where are you? We need the parking pass." At 10:45, "Call Mom now, we're almost there." I shot Ryan a quick text to let him know my family was on their way, and he replied right away, "Got it, everything's under control here." I silenced my phone again and ordered room service, determined to protect my peace while the drama played out. At exactly 11:03 a.m., my security app pinged with motion at my apartment door. I opened the feed and watched the whole thing unfold live. There were my parents and Lauren standing in the hallway, my dad pounding on the door while my mom kept ringing the bell. Lauren was pacing, talking on her phone, probably trying to get a hold of me. After a few minutes of getting nowhere, my dad pulled out his phone and, I guessed, called building management. I could just imagine the conversation with the weekend security staff. No, they couldn't let anyone in who wasn't on the lease, even if they were family. The camera kept rolling as my family retreated, probably heading to the lobby to regroup. About 20 minutes later, they came back with a security officer who seemed to be explaining the rules. My mom threw her hands up in frustration, and my dad's posture got that stiff, stubborn look he always had when things didn't go his way. The security guard wasn't having any of it, he just stood his ground, doing his job. Just as they looked ready to give up, the apartment door opened and Ryan stepped out, looking relaxed in jeans and a t-shirt, coffee mug in hand. Even without sound, I could see the shock on my family's faces. They actually stepped back in surprise. Ryan looked calm and professional, probably explaining that he was the legal occupant, while my family tried to process what was happening. My mom clutched her chest in her classic distressed pose. My dad leaned in aggressively until the security officer stepped between them, and Lauren just stood there, her face shifting from confusion to pure outrage as it all sank in. The whole showdown lasted less than 5 minutes before the security officer led my family back to the elevator. My dad's stiff back and my mom's wild hand gestures said it all. They were furious, but there was nothing they could do. I let out a long breath, realizing I'd been holding it the whole time. Almost immediately my phone blew up with notifications. My dad left voicemails threatening everything from calling the police about an unauthorized occupant, to showing up at my office on Monday if I didn't call back. My mom's messages went from confused to accusatory. "How could you do this to your sister? We raised you better than this." Lauren's texts were pure rage, just a stream of all-caps insults questioning my loyalty, my character, and whether I was even a decent human being. I forwarded the most alarming messages to Chloe, who had already volunteered to keep an eye on things in case I needed any legal backup. After reading through them, she texted, "Your family is seriously losing it, but you're totally in the right here. Don't back down." Around 1 in the afternoon, Ryan gave me a call to fill me in on what had happened face to face. "Your dad tried to insist he had your permission to come in," he told me. When I showed him the sublease paperwork, he claimed it was fake. The security guy had to step in and remind him that trying to force entry could get the police involved. Ryan let out a small laugh. "They finally left when your dad realized he was making a scene in front of the neighbors. Your mom said they'd be taking this up with you directly." I thanked Ryan for handling everything so calmly and asked if he was still comfortable with our arrangement, given all the drama. "Absolutely," he said without hesitation. "Your family's issues don't change our agreement. Your place is safe." By early evening, the flood of calls and texts had slowed down, replaced by a more calculated approach. Aunt Lisa called, clearly drafted as the family mediator, her voice soft and full of practiced concern. "Everyone's just worried about you, Emma. It's not like you to shut out your family when they need you." I let her voicemail play out but didn't call back, recognizing the old tactic of bringing in extended family to pile on the pressure when direct guilt trips weren't working. My dad's last message of the day came in at 10:30 p.m., his voice tight and controlled but simmering with anger. "Your mother is beside herself. Lauren has nowhere to go. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. This childish behavior ends now. Call us in the morning so we can arrange access to your apartment." As I got ready for bed in my quiet hotel room, I felt a strange sense of peace, even after all the chaos. For the first time, I'd drawn a line and actually held it, even as my family tried to bulldoze right over it. Sure, the guilt and anxiety were still there, old habits die hard, but there was something new too. A fragile pride in my own strength and the realization that I deserved the basic respect of being asked about my own home. I knew tomorrow would bring more pushback as my family tried to adjust to this new reality, but that night I let myself accept a simple truth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to stop playing along with unhealthy patterns, even if it makes everyone uncomfortable. Real change starts with the courage to say no, especially when saying yes would mean giving up your self-respect. Sunday morning arrived with a strange, peaceful quiet, the kind that settles in after a big storm. The first thing I did was check my security feed, relieved to see no surprise visitors had shown up overnight. My phone had fewer messages than I expected, which made me think my family was regrouping, probably coming up with a new plan. The first text came from Lauren at 7:15 a.m., and her tone was a world away from yesterday's fury. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I have nowhere to go. Is this about that time I borrowed your sweater in high school and stretched it out?" I said I was sorry. The way she tried to shrink the whole situation down to a silly old argument instead of facing the real issue was so typical of our family that I almost laughed. I didn't reply, knowing this was just the opening move in the usual dance of guilt and deflection. By mid-morning, my mom had shifted from anger to bargaining, leaving a voicemail with compromises, that still ignored my boundaries. Maybe Lauren could just stay for 2 weeks while she finds another place. We could pay you a little rent if that's what this is about. Family helps family, Emma. The idea that my boundary was about money, not respect, showed just how much she missed the point. My dad's messages changed too, moving from orders to a more calculated, reasonable tone. I understand you feel we should have talked this through more. That's fair. Let's sit down like adults and work out a solution that helps your sister and respects your concerns. Even with the softer words, it was clear he still expected Lauren to move in, just with my consent tacked on to make it look official. Around noon, I got a text from my brother Mason, who'd been silent through all of this. Mom and Dad are losing it. Lauren's at their place complaining nonstop. Not sure what you did, but honestly, respect for standing up to them. His message was the first sign from anyone in the family that maybe I wasn't crazy for drawing a line, and it gave me a little boost against all the pressure. Ryan kept me updated throughout the day, letting me know that building security had stepped up patrols on my floor after my family's outburst. Your dad called the management office this morning, he told me. The weekend manager said he demanded to talk to someone about fraudulent sublease paperwork, but was told everything was filed correctly and totally legal. That failed attempt to go over my head just proved I'd made the right call by handling things officially instead of getting sucked into another emotional tug-of-war. By Sunday evening, the extended family started chiming in, clearly after hearing a very one-sided version of events. Grandma Rose called to say she was disappointed I wouldn't help poor Lauren in her time of need. Aunt Lisa sent a long email about the importance of sibling bonds and how I'd regret this selfishness when I was older and needed family. I archived their messages without replying, recognizing this as the next phase, widening the circle to bring in more voices, hoping the extra pressure would finally make me cave. Monday morning started off with a dose of reality as my dad sent a short, clipped message about Lauren's furniture, which was apparently still sitting in a rented moving truck, racking up daily fees. This situation is costing us money now. What do you suggest we do with your sister's belongings? It was the closest he'd come to admitting their plan had fallen apart and they were being forced to consider other options. I didn't reply right away, letting the consequences of their assumptions settle in without my help. By the afternoon, my mom had switched back to emotional tactics, texting me a photo of Lauren looking miserable, surrounded by boxes in their living room. "This is what your stubbornness has caused," she wrote, trying to pin the blame for their failed scheme on me. I muted the conversation and spent the evening looking up family therapists in our area, realizing that if there was any hope of salvaging a healthy relationship, we'd need some professional help. Tuesday finally brought a hint of real change. My dad's tone shifted from demanding to practical. "We're looking at apartment listings for Lauren. Let us know when you're ready to discuss what happened." There was no apology or acknowledgement of how far they'd overstepped, but the fact that they were now searching for other housing for Lauren was the first real sign that my boundary was being noticed, even if it wasn't fully respected yet. That night I wrote out a careful reply, my first direct message since the whole showdown. "I'm glad you're helping Lauren find her own place. I'll be back in town Friday and I'm willing to meet and talk on Saturday afternoon." I kept it neutral, offering a chance to talk without apologizing or getting pulled into their emotional drama. Wednesday and Thursday passed with barely any contact, which told me my family was finally sitting with the situation and maybe starting to process it. Lauren sent one message asking if I could store just a few boxes in my apartment until she found a place, but I politely declined, holding firm to the boundary I'd set. By Friday morning, as I checked out of my hotel, I felt ready to face my family again, this time from a place of real strength. The past week had been tough, but it had forced all of us to look at patterns we'd never questioned before. Driving back into the city, I knew the conversation ahead would be hard, but it was necessary. Either we'd rebuild our relationship on healthier terms, or I'd have to accept that some distance was needed to protect my independence. Either way, I was coming at this as a grown adult with real rights and boundaries, not the always accommodating daughter who put herself last. That shift in how I saw myself was the real win, more than anything else that happened during this whole ordeal. Saturday afternoon arrived, golden autumn sunlight pouring through the windows of the coffee shop I'd picked for our meeting, a neutral spot halfway between my place and my parents' house. I got there 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table where I could see the door and have a little privacy. Ordering a cappuccino gave me a moment to steady my nerves and mentally review the main points I wanted to make, determined to stay calm and clear no matter how my family approached things. My mom showed up first, 5 minutes early as usual, her face carefully composed but her quick blinking giving away her nerves. She moved in for a hug but I offered a handshake instead, a small but important signal that things were different now. My dad and Lauren arrived together a few minutes later, my dad's face set in that stern, negotiation-ready look, and Lauren's eyes red and puffy, either from crying or lack of sleep. We all sat down in awkward silence, the usual family script thrown off by everything that had happened. Dad cleared his throat, slipping right into his usual role as the one who sets the agenda. Well, Emma, I think you owe us all an explanation for your behavior last weekend. The way he framed it was no surprise, putting me in the hot seat as if I was the one who'd crossed a line. I kept my voice steady and even. Actually, I think we need to talk about why you all made plans for my apartment without even asking me first. That caught them off guard. My mom's eyebrows shot up and my dad's mouth tightened. Lauren shifted in her seat, suddenly fascinated by her untouched coffee. We were just trying to help your sister, my mom said, her voice slipping into that gentle, scolding tone she'd used to smooth over family fights for years. You have that extra room just sitting there and Lauren needed a place. Family helps family. That old line hung in the air, the same one I'd heard every time I was expected to sacrifice, but never when I needed help myself. I get that Lauren needed support, I said, but deciding she'd move into my home without even asking me wasn't help. It was a total disregard for my space and my right to make my own decisions. My dad leaned forward, his patience wearing thin. This melodramatic language isn't helpful, Emma. Invasion, autonomy, we're talking about your sister needing a place to stay, not some philosophical debate about boundaries. I recognized the tactic, dismissing my concerns as overblown. But this time I was ready for it. It is about boundaries, Dad. Healthy ones. Would you have made these plans for Lauren to move into Mason's apartment without asking him first? That question landed. My dad leaned back, thinking it over while my mom jumped in quickly. That's different. Mason's situation is different. Her vague answer just highlighted the double standard I'd lived with for years. How is it different? I asked gently. Is it because you respect his space and choices in a way you don't respect mine? Lauren finally spoke up, her voice wavering between defensiveness and confusion. I didn't know they hadn't talked to you first. They told me you were fine with it. That changed the tone of the conversation. It became clear my parents hadn't just left me out. They'd also misled Lauren about what I'd agreed to. My mom's cheeks flushed as she stared down at her coffee cup, suddenly quiet. We were planning to go over the details with you, but we figured you'd be on board once you understood what Lauren was dealing with, my mom said. The assumption in her words just hung there, impossible to miss. That's exactly the issue, I replied, keeping my voice steady. You didn't talk to me because you assumed I'd just say yes, no matter what was going on in my own life. You treated my apartment like it was up for grabs, not like it was my personal space. My dad looked like he was about to jump in with a rebuttal, but then he paused, actually thinking about what I'd said. The silence stretched out, and when he finally spoke, his tone was softer, less defensive than I'd expected. Maybe we should have handled this differently. Your living situation is your business and we crossed a line. Hearing him admit that, even if it was a little grudging, was more than I'd honestly hoped for. I felt something in my chest loosen up just a bit. My mom still looked troubled, clearly torn between her need for family harmony and the fact that things had changed. We just want what's best for both of you girls, she said, reaching out again. You've always been so independent, Emma. Sometimes we forget to check if you need your own space. That, sometimes, was a pretty big understatement after years of them steamrolling my boundaries, but I could tell this was as close to an apology as I was going to get right now. Lauren glanced at our parents, then looked straight at me, her face more open than I'd seen in a long time. I'm sorry, Em. I should have called you myself instead of just assuming everything was set. That was really thoughtless. Her apology was simple and real, and it caught me off guard. Thank you for saying that, I told her, meaning it. I would have been glad to help you figure something out if you'd just asked me first. From there, the conversation shifted. Instead of accusations, we started talking about solutions. My dad mentioned a few apartments they'd found for Lauren, places that were more affordable than she'd wanted, but doable with a little help from them. My mom suggested we all pitch in to help Lauren move once she found a place, adding, "If everyone's available," and giving me a look that said she understood things had to be different now. As the tension faded, I brought up the last point I'd been holding on to, the one I was most nervous about. From now on, I need a few things to change. I want direct communication, not assumptions. I want to be asked about decisions that affect my life before they're made. And I need to be able to say no without being made to feel like I'm selfish or difficult. My dad nodded, the business side of him recognizing a fair deal, even if the dad side was still catching up. That's reasonable. We'll do our best. My mom reached across the table, not to grab my hand, but just to rest hers nearby, a small gesture of connection without overstepping. We love you, Emma. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to manage everything that we forget you're an adult with your own life. As we wrapped up and made tentative plans to help Lauren look at apartments the next weekend, I felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. We hadn't fixed everything, decades of old habits don't disappear in one afternoon, but we'd set a new tone and I was determined to keep it going. As our parents headed to the car, Lauren lingered behind and gently caught my arm. "I really am sorry," she said, her voice low and more genuine than I was used to. "And honestly, I'm kind of impressed. I've never seen anyone stand up to mom and dad like that." Her words gave me a kind of validation I hadn't expected. It wasn't easy, I admitted, but it was something I had to do for all of us. Watching them drive away, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because I'd finally spoken up for myself in a family that had always expected me to stay quiet. Coming back to my apartment after Ryan's sublease ended felt like stepping into a place that was finally, truly mine. Nothing in the space had changed, every piece of furniture, every photo, every little detail was exactly as I'd left it, but something inside me was different. For the first time, I felt a real sense of ownership over my sanctuary, not just in a legal sense but in my heart. That first evening alone, I stood in my living room and let my hand drift along the bookshelf my dad had once so casually suggested I clear out for Lauren's things. I took a moment to appreciate how every item on those shelves was there because I wanted it there, not because I was making room for someone else's needs or expectations. The week after our coffee shop meeting brought some subtle but meaningful shifts in how my family communicated with me. My mom started calling instead of just texting, and her questions were actually phrased as requests, not assumptions. "We're helping Lauren look at apartments on Saturday if you'd like to join us," she said one day, her words careful and open, finally giving me the space to say no without feeling guilty. My dad kept his distance, but even his messages changed. Instead of barking out instructions, he sent updates, just information, no pressure, no expectation that I had to respond. The biggest surprise was Lauren. She reached out and asked if I wanted to grab lunch, just the two of us. It had been years since we'd done that, and I could feel the difference right away. Over salads, she opened up about her own struggles with our parents' expectations and admitted she'd honestly believed I was happy to let her move in. "They always made it sound like you were eager to help," she said, poking at her food. "I never questioned it because that's the story they always told about you, the responsible, accommodating one." Hearing her say that made me realize how much our parents had shaped the way we saw each other, casting us in roles that kept us from really connecting. "I'm trying to be more independent now," she told me. "Watching you stand up for yourself made me realize how much I've let them run my life." That conversation felt like the start of something real between us, a relationship built on honesty and directness, not just the parts we were assigned to play in the family. Of course, rebuilding our family dynamic wasn't all smooth sailing. My mom would sometimes slip back into old habits, making little comments about how my new attitude was making it harder to plan family events. My dad, for his part, sometimes pulled away, clearly uncomfortable with the new balance of power. The next family dinner was a little tense, with all of us trying to figure out how to act now that the old script had been thrown out. But even with those bumps, I could feel my confidence growing. Every time I stood my ground, politely but firmly, the old guilt that used to paralyze me got a little weaker. When my mom called to ask if I'd host Thanksgiving, even though I'd already said no, I was able to stick to my answer without spiraling into hours of anxious self-justification. "That doesn't work for me this year," I said simply and directly. I offered to bring a couple of side dishes to whoever did host, but I didn't budge. The pause on the other end of the line before she accepted my answer felt like a win, a small one but a win all the same. Lauren ended up finding a cozy one-bedroom apartment in early December, closer to her job than she would have ever considered before. I helped her move in, and for once there was no tension between us, just two sisters working together. As we set up her new place, she told me she'd started seeing a therapist, inspired in part by watching me set boundaries. I need to figure out who I am besides being the artistic, emotional daughter who always needs saving, she said as we put together her bookshelf. I want to be someone who can handle her own life. Hearing her say that with so much honesty, built a bridge between us that was stronger than anything we'd had as kids, a connection based on mutual respect, not just the roles our parents had handed us. The real test of how much our family dynamic had changed came during the holidays, when we all gathered at my parents' place for Christmas dinner. This time my mom actually called me ahead of time to ask what dish I'd like to bring instead of just telling me what I was responsible for, a small gesture, but one that really showed she was starting to see me as an adult with my own choices. My dad greeted me with a warmth I hadn't felt from him since our big showdown, asking real questions about my job and what I was looking forward to in the new year. It was clear he was slowly getting used to the new balance in our family. As we exchanged gifts and swapped stories around the table, I noticed little changes in how everyone acted. My parents checked in with each other before making decisions, instead of just announcing what would happen. Lauren, for the first time, gently pushed back when Mom started giving her career advice she hadn't asked for. And I found myself speaking up more, sharing my own opinions even when they didn't match the family's usual way of thinking. The night wasn't perfect, old habits popped up here and there, but each time, someone would catch it and steer things back on track. It felt like real progress even if we still had a ways to go. Driving home that night, I thought about everything that had happened over the past few months. From that first family dinner where my parents just decided Lauren would move into my apartment, to this Christmas where my boundaries were finally being noticed, even if they weren't always perfectly respected. I knew healing old family patterns would take time and that I'd have to keep reinforcing my boundaries now and then. But the biggest change wasn't just in how my family treated me, it was in how I saw myself in relation to them. I realized that standing up for myself didn't have to mean cutting people off or always being in a fight. It could mean making room for more honest, respectful relationships, where we connect as real people instead of just playing the roles we were handed. When I unlocked my apartment door that night, coming back to the space I'd worked so hard to protect, I felt grateful not just for my home, but for the stronger sense of self I'd found inside these walls. Looking back, the most important thing I learned from this whole messy family situation wasn't about who gets to live where or who owns what. It was about the simple truth that healthy relationships need both love and boundaries, both care and respect. By finally saying no to something I would have just accepted in the past, I opened the door to a more genuine connection with my family, one based on who we really are, not just who we're supposed to be. So, have you ever had to stand up to your family to protect your own boundaries? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the hardest people to set limits with are the ones we care about most, but as I've learned, it's often the healthiest thing we can do for ourselves and for them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more about navigating tricky family situations and personal growth. And remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's the foundation for real, lasting relationships.